Hey, welcome. It's Scott with Zendy AI on the Systems Are Sexy podcast. Today, we are joined by Nick Offenkamp. He's the founder of the DIY Home Buyer Academy. Nick is shaking up the real estate world by empowering buyers to take control of their home purchases and save thousands in commissions. So he's really passionate about knowledge and tools and confidence to giving people the opportunity to represent themselves without having to rely on traditional agents. So we're going to dive into his journey, talk a little bit about his past and how DIY Homebuyer Academy came to be. So Nick, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, man. It's been great to connect and glad to jump in here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just maybe start from the beginning. Obviously, you're a real estate agent, you have your own brokerage, but how did the transition happen from that to your academy?
Yeah, good question. So, the succinct version of it is that I got into real estate primarily as a real estate investor when I was living in the Midwest and was realizing how much money I was spending in buyer agent fees whenever I wanted to buy an investment property. So I thought, wow, to reduce fees, I should get licensed and represent myself. So that's how I originally got my real estate license. And then I started working for a new home builder after getting my license. And it was interesting in the world of new construction, over half of the clients that I worked with did not have a buyer's agent. And so I was exposed to this whole world in which buying real estate without a buyer agent was the norm, and people were successfully closing transactions every day of the week. So as I started thinking through, man, I got my license because I was trying to avoid high buyer agency fees. Now I'm working with buyers who don't need an agent in order to successfully close on a home. And then I'm looking at all of the regulatory changes that are happening with the lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors. I just was like, man, there's got to be more people who are going to start wanting to learn how to represent themselves without having to go through the full process of getting licensed. And I was shocked as I started to look around. You would think that there would be tons of resources to help self-represented buyers. There's almost nothing. Lots and lots out there for sale by owner, but almost nothing that was buyer specific. So I thought, man, this seems like a real opportunity, like true entrepreneurship, right? You see a problem in the market and you want to build a solution to solve it. And it's felt like, yeah, this is an area where I both have a passion to make a dent in the world and a real opportunity to realize that.
Yeah, so kind of give us an idea is, let's say somebody is interested in the academy. How does it help buyers navigate the process on their own without having to rely upon an agent?
Yeah, fantastic. So most of it is educational emphasis, right? Like I really believe that an educated consumer is the best kind of consumer, and education is empowerment. So most people, I believe, have the competency to represent themselves, just like most people have the competency to file their own taxes or to purchase a car without needing to have another agent representing them. But most American consumers are just intimidated by the process because one, it is a huge financial transaction, and two, there's a lot of legal documents that are intimidating if you don't know what it is that you're looking at. So I just figured that, man, if I'm able to break down the steps of home buying, which has been highly standardized really across all states over the past several decades now, if I'm able to break down those steps and then help bring definition to what are these legal documents, what are contingencies, what do you need to succeed in representing yourself without an agent, well, more people would feel empowered to do so. So that's really that's why I've called it the Homebuyer DIY Homebuyer Academy, is because it really is that emphasis on education. And there's multiple levels at which people can kind of select the degree of service that they need, whether that's simply just watching free content that I put out on YouTube, whether that's downloading resources that I've created, guides, checklists, workbooks, or whether that's booking one-on-one time with me, where just hourly consultation to walk you through the most critical moments of the process. This gives consumers a whole lot of flexibility and freedom to figure out the process and get the help where they need it the most.
You know, it's been interesting. We've had calls or podcasts with a lot of people in property tech, and it seems like every industry is ripe for disruption, right? Some way or another. But I feel like real estate is like at the top of the list. There's just feel like it's been this way for 50 years and a lot of people are resistant to change. How do you feel like that's going to play out for you? Is this something that this is in a year we're going to see significant movement? Is this a longer play? Just because it's hard to shift people away from the way it's always been done.
Yeah, it sure is, right? And it's kind of interesting because I've been studying what happened with the rise of TurboTax, because before TurboTax, it was just if you're going to file your taxes, you're either going to do it yourself following guidance from the IRS website or wherever you're going to get it, or you're going to meet with a CPA. And TurboTax completely disrupted that. It seems like I don't know if it is truly, but it feels like the majority of Americans are doing e-filing. And then a similar kind of thing in the travel world, right? Like before Expedia and some of those platforms, you would book your big vacations through a travel agent. And now there's still travel agents, but they exist to serve very niche sort of clientele. And so I look at those transitions and disruptions in the past and think that real estate is ripe for a similar level of disruption. And I think that it'll all happen kind of slowly at first and then all at once, where in 10 years, we're going to look back and be like, can you believe that we actually used to use buyer agent, that that's the way that it was? But it's really hard to pinpoint exactly when that will be. I mean, there's a huge moat around real estate, some of that formed by the National Association of Realtors, which is a huge trade organization, has a lot of political power. There's a lot of state and legal sort of hurdles that need to be cleared. But there are a lot of money that's being poured into the prop tech space, a lot of great companies that are starting to emerge that are trying to be the TurboTax equivalent of real estate to make the transaction a whole lot more efficient in every sense of the word.
Normally, you wouldn't see a realtor starting a business like this. Why was it motivating for you to do that? Because people are going to wait. He's a realtor too.
Right. It's been kind of an awkward deal because I still my primary source of income as I'm continuing to build DIY Homebuyer has been through traditional real estate, both representing sellers and buyers. And it also, it certainly puts a target on my back. Most realtors locally are not a fan what it is that I'm trying to do because they see it as a threat to their livelihood. But some of it for me is I like to try and look around corners and see, okay, where is it that we're actually headed? And I don't want to spend the next 30 years of my life fighting for a dying industry or a dying breed of how we do real estate agency. I'd rather be pushing the ball forward. And so that's a piece of it of just, I think that change is inevitable here. I also think that the changes that are coming, or at least that I'm advocating for, which is that of consumer empowerment and education, that feels good. It just feels right when I go to bed at night. Like this is making a positive impact in the world. I'm not gatekeeping information from people or trying to make a real estate transaction sound more complicated and scary than it actually is. I'm breaking it down and simplifying it. So there's an alignment with just who I am and how I'm wired. And then finally, I think from a business standpoint too, real estate is not only inefficient for people who are buying and selling homes, it's a very inefficient business for agents because you waste a ton of time showing homes to clients that never end up actually purchasing, which means you have to make your money on the people that truly do. But with the DIY Homebuyer Academy, by creating resources, doing one-on-one consulting at an hourly fee, I'm compensated directly for the time that I'm spending with somebody, which means I don't have to gouge people that actually move forward with inflated commissions.
What kind of mistakes do you see? Maybe someone that's a first time DIY buyer that they're making, they're just not aware of.
Yeah, a lot of it is just from the very get go, not recognizing how relational of a business real estate is, and that they can really shoot themselves in the foot by coming in too hot when they're interacting with a listing agent, almost with a sense of arrogance or entitlement. And I think it comes from typically a good place of wanting to represent themselves well and be strong in their negotiations or whatever it is. But they forget that they're dealing with another human, and that human agent is also going to relay how that initial conversation with the buyer went to the seller. And if it feels like it was intense up front, or if it feels like the buyer was unprepared up front, those things are going to get relayed to the seller. And even more than purchase price, what a seller is concerned about is the buyer's ability to close on a sale. And so many DIY or would be DIY buyers, they just don't understand that that first impression matters so much, whether it's the first time that you call the listing agent to introduce yourself, or the first time that you show up for a showing or an open house. The way that you enter into that relationship with the listing agent is going to set the tone for the whole rest of the transaction. So I spend a lot of time just even getting people's mindset right there and thinking about, here's, whether it's scripts that you're wanting to use and rehearse before you actually talk to a listing agent, just to make sure that the relationship gets off to the right start.
What about with the NAR ruling from last year? Are there misconceptions with buyers now not knowing how that all works with who gets what commission?
Yeah, I think there are. I think that there's unfortunately a ton of misconceptions just in the way that rollout. And for as much as my focus is educating home buyers, I'm always surprised by how much I'm educating realtors as well on what the rights of self-represented buyers are. But specifically for home buyers, I think that they don't often understand how buyer agents are compensated. And before the lawsuit, there was this misnomer that the buyer agent is paid by the seller, and therefore the buyer agent is functionally free to the home buyer. Now, one of the outcomes of that whole settlement against NAR was that buyers now need to have a buyer agency agreement with their buyer's agent should they choose to hire one. And that buyer agency agreement should make the compensation to the agent very explicit, and it should make it known that the buyer is on the hook for that compensation if the seller is unwilling to pay or to offer that sort of a concession. I don't think that buyer agents do the best job of explaining this. I still hear a lot of buyer agents making it sound like their services are free because most sellers are still offering to cover buyer agent compensation. But that would be my biggest caution to any home buyer right now, is that a buyer agent is never free and has never been free. That even if it looks like the seller is paying them, the compensation for your agent then is just getting baked into the price of the home that you are paying. And you're actually, if you're financing the home, you're going to be paying for your agent's compensation with interest. So the buyer should always think of the buyer agent's fee as their expense.
Do you, not to put you on the spot too much here, but do you have any examples of maybe some buyers that have gone through your academy and used the strategies, and maybe they bought a house on their own, or just kind of like a success story with somebody of one of your clients?
Yeah, I've actually got several. There's a gal that I was working with down in Utah named Catherine, and she's wonderful. So I know she wouldn't mind me sharing her story. She's actually a first time home buyer and looking at buying a home that was kind of in the 450 to $500,000 range, which kind of crazy to think that that's like a modest home by today's standards, a $500,000. But so first home, and she had actually found me through a Reddit forum on a post that I had commented on, and it kind of planted the seed for her of representing herself. Her and her husband had had a bad experience with a buyer agent previously, where they felt like they were being triangulated by the buyer's agent. She was more financially conservative than her husband was. And it felt like the agent was always siding with her husband, trying to push them towards buying a more expensive home or trying to rush them in the decision. So it was creating marital conflict for them. And they said, we're done with this agent. And that's where she got connected with me and decided that they were going to go and represent themselves. Based upon her husband's kind of work schedule, I mostly work directly with her, but using the content, the guides, and some one-on-one consulting, we were able to talk through, like I'd mentioned earlier, just how to initiate the conversation with a listing agent, introducing yourself as a self represented buyer, asking for a non agency disclosure that just stipulates what the relationship is and isn't, having your pre approval and financial ducks in a row, just showing that you're serious about the home. That raises the level of respect that a listing agent is going to treat the buyer with. There was some hurdles that had to be worked through when it came to negotiations after the home inspection. So her and I hopped on a call to just talk through the inspection report, talk through, hey, what are some of the things that are more normal cosmetic wear and tear, the kinds of things that as a home buyer you might reasonably expect with a 20-year-old home versus, hey, these are some of the things that are a bigger concern, and then how to actually negotiate those. And so, in her case, instead of having the seller do the repairs, she was able to negotiate an additional $4,500 credit as a closing cost credit, reducing how much she needed to bring to the table so that she would be able to take care of those repairs after closing on her own. Those were the most critical moments. Otherwise, just with the guides that she was following that I'd put together, she was able to go through the process. And the beauty that she found too, the title company that they were working with, the escrow agent there was really, really helpful in answering questions about title report as well as just process and timeline. She also had a wonderful local lender that was looking out for her because obviously the lender has a huge stake in making sure that she's not buying a money pit. And so between the appraisal and staying in good conversation with the lender, there are just multiple hands that were there to help guide her and her husband along in the process. And they successfully closed on their home a couple of months ago, and they saved, gosh, well, between the credit and the being able to negotiate 2.5% concession by not having a buyer agent that the seller was otherwise planning to pay, they saved close to $20,000 on their house.
That's crazy. Is there a stigma you think if you're a seller's agent, if someone comes to you that is representing themselves? I mean, I don't, obviously you would feel differently about it since that's what you do, but do you think there are agents out there that go, oh, wow, this person's representing themselves? I'm a little concerned.
There is. And that's why it's so important for buyers that are representing themselves to go the extra mile in coming off as very prepared, but also very personable. Unfortunately, because of the stigma that basically listing agents, most of them will look at a self represented buyer as being more risky than somebody who has an agent. And this is bogus because what is it, 80% of agents didn't close a single transaction last year. So just because somebody has an agent doesn't mean that that agent is full time, doesn't mean that they know their stuff. It's not a litmus test for competency. And this is something that as I have a voice in the realtor community, I try to talk about all the time is that we want competent buyers, competent consumers. So anyhow, the fear though that most listing agents are going to have is that this buyer doesn't know what they're doing. They're going to create more work and more headaches for me, and they're probably going to back out of this deal over something petty or small. So we'd be better off not dealing with them. And because of those biases, that's where it's really important that self represented buyers are able to come in and assuage those fears by saying, hey, I am financially prepared. I am working with somebody like Nick at the DIY Homebuyer Academy. I am educated. I'm not just somebody who's saw your name on a sign and is now calling you up and just looking to save a quick buck.
How do you think AI and technology is going to affect not just the real estate industry, but even just buyer representation? Because there's so many changes happening in real estate, but also technology is affected every industry out there. How do you think it's going to affect this part of the business going forward?
Yeah, I think it'll change it radically, like in ways that are probably hard to fully appreciate on this side of the changes. I do think that there's a real opportunity for, like I was saying earlier, a TurboTax equivalent that's AI empowered. And I know of some good folks that are developing programs like that. Like there's a friend of mine, Armand Javaharian at Homa AI, and it's incredible what they're building. So I'm sure that more platforms will arise that are able to both help buyers fill out standardized contracts for any given MLS or state. Also, AI that will be able to help go through inspection reports and highlight what should be addressed, what shouldn't be, as well as be able to put together approximate bids on how much different repairs would be. And AI is already great, like in terms of just being able to converse with and bounce ideas off of or work through negotiation strategies. And I'm sure there will be AI empowered tools that help buyers work through negotiations too. So, in some ways, it kind of feels like, well, everything that I'm building, AI will very likely be able to replace within the next a couple of years. But there is some degree to which real estate has this highly relational, highly human element. Like our homes are different than our cars. And a Honda Civic is a Honda Civic, whether you buy it in Texas or you buy it in Washington. That's just not the same. It's not the case with a 3,400 square foot, 5 bedroom, 3 bathroom house. Like it could be the same floor plan in Texas or Washington, but the lot is going to be totally different. The sort of weather is like all of those factors. And because of the personal connections too that we have to our homes, I do think that there's always going to be a opportunity for real human care and guidance. I think that there are human elements to negotiations with sellers that ultimately are needed to bring deals together. So I'm not somebody who thinks that AI will fully replace some degree of human agency within real estate transactions, but I do think it's going to radically, radically change the game.
Yeah, absolutely. You had mentioned someone found you on Reddit. How else are people finding out about you?
Yeah, YouTube is the best way because the YouTube algorithm is just so powerful in terms. I mean, YouTube being, I think they call it. Maybe this is changing now with Chat GPT, but I think it's still the second largest search engine on the internet. And so a lot of folks are just they're curious. How do I buy a home without a realtor? And I've been pretty fortunate that at least for now, there's not a lot of people creating content in that space. So that's how most people come across my stuff is they're looking for answers to is there a better way or another way to do this? And YouTube's algorithm feeds up my content. Otherwise, it's through things like Reddit, LinkedIn, which is how you and I had gotten connected. I'm active on there. I had done last year quite a bit with short form. I was posting 2 or 3 times a day on TikTok and Instagram, and candidly, kind of got burnt out on that. And the quality of the folks that I was making connections with just wasn't nearly as high as some of the other platforms. So I've sort of stepped away from that. But if I had to just choose one place where people were finding me and only one place to create content, for sure YouTube has been the highest return on my time and investment.
Obviously, you started the business. It's growing. What do you think your biggest pain points or bottlenecks are to really get it to the masses?
Yeah. I think it's still the distribution piece. There's some of it where it's like I have a lot to grow in as a content creator, and I'm limited as well in terms of just time and finances when it comes to editing videos and making something that's really high level and polished. So most of my content is information first. Like I'm just trying to create the best information that I can, and then everything else is pretty low tech in terms of the edits. So I would love to improve my just process and workflow on content creation and hopefully create content that's more engaging. But then it's also just without having a huge advertising budget, how do I get this message of self-representation in front of as many live buyers as possible? And really finding who's the target audience that this message is going to resonate with the best. Because it can feel like you create the YouTube video and you hit publish, and then I'm really at the mercy of YouTube's algorithm to find the right people. And I would rather have more control in that myself, being able to target the right audience.
So let's say somebody's interested in learning more about your program and your academy. What do you recommend they do?
Yeah. The YouTube channel is a great place to just start because again, it's just YouTube DIY home buyer. You'll find me there, and there have been plenty of people that just through the videos alone have been able to save themselves $20,000 their home purchase. So Excuse me. So just that alone is creating a ton of value for folks. But if you want to connect with me one on one, you can go just Nick at DIYHomebuyerAcademy.com, shoot me an email. We can set up a time to connect. And then I haven't been super active on it. Honestly, I'm trying to figure out exactly what to do with it. But there's a free community for DIY home buyers that I've built on the school platform. And so if you want to include that in show notes, I can send you the link to that as well. You'll find a lot of the content from YouTube on there. But if you're looking to just connect with other people that are going through the process and ask them questions, the community board there can be really helpful too.
It was great, Nick. Thanks so much for sharing your story. It's really impressive.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Love talking with you. Love what you're building. And this has been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks.